this is part of the history that made this hotel, which started off as a guest house, ending up being what it is. And I think it's kind of a special place, and
it's an iconic hotel.
It is iconic, and it's worth coming here and staying.
Okay, so this is the whiskey bar in Cascades in the Stanley Hotel.
Yeah.
And supposedly they have 1,200 bottles of bourbon here. Or 1,200 bottles of whiskey. I don't know if it's all bourbon. Whiskey. Which I can see they have like a lot. Pretty impressive.
So I've got my nice wine.
I got my nice Wellers. And reasonable rare. Got his nice eel rare.
Good. And
Cheers.
we just cheers.
Anyway, so he's got salad. I got all of us got a cheese platter, which is great.
So they have a Declaration of Independence. There's the big John Hancock.
Yeah.
We hear about, look how old this thing is. I don't know if it's a copy that got
Copy that aged. Are they
aged or got left, or but this is super cool. Like, oh, there we go. Reprint published in the Department of the Institute of the Bureau of Washington, D.C. That's cool, though.
Feet, but I have had people pass out on these tours before. So if you just flew in from like Des Moines, and I'm just picking a city that's flat in elevation, you hopped a rental right over here, you might feel a little funny at first. Water is our best friend up here in the mountains. Guys, if y'all start to feel funny, just let me know. I'll sit you down, I'll make a phone call, we'll get somebody to bring y'all some water, because I don't want anybody to pass out here on my tour, okay? It's been a moment. We don't want this to happen anymore. I want you guys to leave this hotel going, that was a beautiful place. What a great tour. What a nice guy. Not in the back of an ambulance, okay? So rule number 1, no passing out.
Good, got it. So we wanted to give you some history of the Stanley Hotel. Now, we did a tour, a historical tour of this hotel, and I highly recommend it. It was super informative. It was very cool. They threw some ghost stuff in there with some amazing footage, by the way.
And they let you see stuff that you can't see just on your own. You
Yeah.
have to be on the tour to get to some of the places in this hotel that are kind of special.
Yeah, behind the scenes. So I do want to tell you though a little bit about the hotel history. So as you can come to appreciate as we did this actual hotel and how it got to be what it is today. So that hotel property was actually bought in 1907 by one of the Stanley twins. So there's 2 of them, and apparently they came from a normal sort of life. I think one of the parents was a teacher or something, so yeah, just to take the history tour to get it exact. But they came from a sort of a normal life and then started inventing things. So they invented some cool photography things, and then they invented the steam car. So it was called the Stanley Steamer. And that was the thing that made them all their money. So now they became fairly wealthy, well, not fairly, very wealthy back in the day, and were hanging out with all the rich folks back east. But then Mr. Stanley actually got tuberculosis, and a lot of people had it back then. And he was not recovering, and he was not doing well.
They were living in New York, right?
Yep, go ahead.
Right.
And so they told him.
So they told him, you need to go up where the air is dry and thin to help with the tuberculosis. So that they went to Denver.
Yeah.
But come to find out that when they went to Denver, it got even worse because Denver was an industrial city. It kind of is still an industrial city, and there's a lot of pollution in there. So they decided to move a little bit higher in the cleaner air of Estes Park, and that's where they bought the land here.
Right, but the air did so well for him, and he became so much better off that he actually recovered. The doctor was surprised to find that he was still alive when he came to check on him, and he was even started mountain climbing. So he was actually hiking up these hills and everything.
Right. As a matter of fact, he summited Long's Peak, which is one of the highest peaks here in Colorado. It was either 2 or 3 times that he did that. So after the tuberculosis, and he moved up here to Estes Park.
So he was so excited about the miracle cure of Estes Park that they built their house out here and they moved out here. Then he was telling all of his friends back east about this place and invited them to come stay with them. Well, when he invited them to come stay with him, they needed a place for the friends and family to stay. And that is why this building was built. It was actually not built as a hotel, but it was built as a guest house for their friends from out east, about 40, 50 rooms here. And then the lodge next door was built the next year because the bachelors could not stay with the women in the same building
Under the same roof.
back then. This building included billiard rooms and bars and a bowling alley. There's an entire another building of a theater and a stage where they had people come and entertain at night and on the weekends to entertain the guests that were here. They had a full kitchen, they had to serve everybody food, and it was all part free, just being part of the Stanley's friends.
Right.
So if you were
and family.
friends, you could come stay here in their guest house. And that is how this place started. That was just incredible to me.
Oh, and then just what the air here and the elevation did for Mr. Stanley. He actually lived to 92. Yeah. And after hiking and everything, like a full recovery from tuberculosis, which was unheard of back then.
So they did turn it into a hotel, and then they sold it off in the 1930s. And then the hotel went through its ups and downs, and that was during the Depression, as things did back then, and it became not as great as it used to be. Well, that's when the next kind of famous person found it, and that was Stephen King. So the story goes
he was up on Trowbridge Road, which we'll talk more about that as well. Trowbridge Road is just absolutely amazing, but they were at the end of the season, getting into wintertime, and the season or the weather can change in an instant up there. And that's exactly what happened. They were headed to the other side and got halfway up there, and the weather changed, so they had to turn around, come back to Estes Park. And in Estes Park back then, everything was closed. These are closing down for the season. They didn't stay open year round like they do now.
this place didn't even have heat.
That's right. So he knocked on the door and asked if they could stay here. They were going to turn him away, but there was nowhere else to go, so they let him in. They opened up one of the suites for him. As a matter of fact, Stephen King wasn't really anything.
No, and the suite was room 270.
217, that's right.
Everything was closed up. They had the chairs on, they were leaving the next day. They had the chairs on the table in the dining room, and everything was closed down.
The food was gone.
Food was gone. They said, we only have we can give you some
Cut
sandwiches.
sandwiches.
And he said that he ate dinner in the restaurant with the rest of the chairs up on the tables, with this old classical music playing, eating sandwiches, and he said it was the weirdest, scariest, eeriest meal he ever had.
Which gave him some of the inspiration for his book.
And the hotel wasn't in the best shape back then. It had seen better days at that time, which also added to the thing. And apparently the bartender was here, and Stephen King went down.
They shared stories about kind of ghost stories. The bartender found out that Stephen King was a horror writer. So he's like, wow, can I share some stories that I've seen while working here? So they spent the entire night, got lit, and talked ghost stories, and came up with a lot of inspirational ideas for his book.
And then the last part is that Stephen King had some nightmares, and he went back and wrote the book, and there's a lot more to the story, but we'll let you hear all that on the tour, which you should take when you're here. But this is part of the history that made this hotel, which started off as a guest house, ending up being what it is. And I think it's kind of a special place, and
It's an iconic hotel.
It is iconic, and it's worth coming here and staying. So,
gotta come here once. That
so
makes sense.
that's a little bit of the history.
Okay.